Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Overcoming Graduation with Bryan Teare. For anyone who is new to the show, Overcoming Graduation is a podcast where I work to teach you everything you need to and want to learn about life to live the life of your dreams. Today, my guest is Bryan Teare, the founder and the host of the Quarter Life Comeback. So at just 27 years old, Bryan is on a mission to help young adults discover what lights them up and guide them in making a massive impact in the world. After a short time in a corporate job as an engineer, Bryan recognized he was quickly falling into a routine that didn't resemble the dream life in his mind. His family had even begun to notice that he was not his normal, happy, cheery self. So then, at a costume party in 2014, he had a game-changing realization, which he's going to tell us about during the show. Shortly after, he had handed in his resignation at work with no plan B or idea of what he would do once he left his career. He went on to travel, work as a personal trainer, a blogger, for a short time a male model, a coach, and is now a podcaster. So he's working to spread his message in multiple different areas and wants to holistically help people improve their lives. Now, I just want to note that Bryan comes to us all the way from South Africa. So in today's episode, we did have some connection issues and some quality problems, just so you guys are aware prior to getting into it. Most of the interview, the quality held up very well, but there definitely were some moments where the quality, the voice dragged out, or it slowed down and sped up. So just so you're aware before we get into it. So in today's interview, Bryan is going to discuss what sparked him to quit his job with no plan B and how he knew it was the right step for him to take. What he heard in one conversation that drove him to hand in his letter of resignation 30 minutes later. How travel changed his life forever and some of the benefits you can expect from taking your own adventures. How fear of disapproval can keep us from having the most important conversations in our lives. Why it is so critical to seek out mentors and how you can get started finding mentors in your life without making a large financial investment. What is conscious capitalism and why it is so important to the way that we are reshaping the world, and so much more. For all of you guys listening and for the OCG community, Bryan was kind enough to offer a free giveaway, which you can find at bryanteare.com/OCG. Of course, that's available in the show notes, but to spell it out, BRYANTEARE.com/OCG. So a special gift for all of you guys, and thank you for listening to the show. So without any further ado, I am excited and pleased to introduce you all to Bryan Teare. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Overcoming Graduation with Bryan Teare. So my guest today comes to you all the way from South Africa, and you'll hear the badass South African accent to boot when he talks. He is the founder of Quarter Life Comeback. So this is something where he has gone through and seen people going through their own quarter life crises and decided that he was not going to be another statistic and create his own amazing existence. So he left his comfy engineering job. He had no plan B, went and traveled Southeast Asia, and then has been experimenting and building into coaching and so many other steps. So we just had the opportunity to get to know each other when I did an interview for his show, and we're doing this back to back, which I've never done before. So Bryan, thank you so much for being on the show today.
Bryan, likewise, thanks for coming on my show, and nice to be here, and hello all the Overcoming Graduation listeners.
See, I told him when we, just before we started our interview, I was like, dude, you got a perfect voice for podcasting. You got the deep kind of baritone, you've got the South African accent. It's going to be dangerous with the ladies, so be careful, ladies. Watch out for some incoming emails, Bryan. But all right, so as we always start off, I like to kick this off by talking about your story at graduation, which varies for, person to person, but I know your story started with a college graduation with an engineering degree. So can you tell us a little bit about what that stage of your life looked like, and what were your thoughts and feelings about the quote-unquote real world as you approached graduation?
Absolutely, thanks for the question. So, I think like a lot of people, and just so we're clear with the different terminology in terms of America versus South Africa. So when I say school, I mean high school.
Okay.
And then for me, university came after high school. So I think that's what you call college.
Yes.
But anyway, so near the end of high school, I didn't really know what I wanted to study further. And I think a lot of people go through that. And I thought that was just, a normal type of thing. And one of my older brothers, so I've got three brothers, and one of them is very engineering. I thought, well, maybe that's something I could enjoy and do well at.
Wait,
and
Bryan,
so I went into engineering.
Oh, you said he was an engineer. We just had a little breakup, so I caught us. So he was an engineer, and you thought, okay, maybe that's something I could enjoy. Okay, please continue.
But yeah, so I went off and I'd always done really well at school, so I could study whatever I wanted to, and I decided to choose engineering, thinking maybe it's something that I'd enjoy. And again, at university, I did really well there, and I actually ended up coming second in my class. Mm-hmm. And I think looking back, I could have done well at whatever I chose to study because I worked hard. So it wasn't necessarily because I was made to be an engineer.
Right.
And also thinking back, there were days where I'm not really proud to admit this, but there were times where I would be sleeping in class because I wasn't really stimulated, and or I'd just kind of do what was necessary to get through, and I could feel that I wasn't really passionate about it, but I thought that maybe that's just a normal part of going to class. And anyway, so after university, because of my good grades, I got a good job, and same thing started happening there. So I don't know if you want me to carry on, if you want to stay at the sort of graduation level.
No, that's great, because it reinforces a very common theme that I find on this show, is that we often all of us have this feeling of, I don't really know if this is right, but I guess this is kind of what you're supposed to do, or maybe this is just how life is. And one of my favorite quotes is from Sean Stevenson, who we referenced a ton on our interview, but never believe a prediction that doesn't make you feel better. Because none of us know the future. None of us have clarity on what's going to happen next. So if we get a prediction from someone like, well, that's how marriage is, that's how relationships are, people tend to say that when they've accepted a negative reality. So at that point, it's like you and I both did. We were like, well, this is kind of just how it is, I guess. But there was something in us that was pushing us to say, nah, man, there's something different out there. So can you tell us about taking that first step into the real world, and then what really started to shift for you in that feeling about, I need to do something different?
Absolutely, man. And I love talking about this. It gets me really pumped up. So yeah, like we mentioned, I didn't really feel like stimulated or anything, but I just thought, well, this is probably just what getting a degree feels like. And looking back, I never really did. I mean, this whole personal development journey, it was nothing that I really got into at that stage of my life. I was just about, going to class, going to sports practice, coming back, partying on the weekend. I never really considered, what do I really want, mm-hmm. and what really makes me come alive. And then, so carrying on from graduation, I started my engineering job, and same thing kind of happened there. It was just like, went to work, did my work, came home. There was nothing really lighting me up. And I did that for just over 2 years. And because of my grades at university, and I'm super grateful. They were a really great company. My colleagues were really cool. My boss was really great. Mm-hmm. Everything about the job was really good, except it didn't really fulfill me. It didn't make me come alive. Right. And so my bursary with the company ended after 2 years being there. So January 2014 mm-hmm. is when the bursary ended. So basically what that meant was that after that, I didn't have to stay at the company. Right. And 1 month later, at my 25th birthday, in February 2014, was a dress-up party. That's how I do it. And so I was with all my friends in my house, and we were chatting about work. So now we'd all been working for about 2 years, and everyone was saying, if I could, or saying things like, the working world sucks, and I hate my job, but the money is good, and this is just what we got to do. And I was saying the same stuff, and then out of nowhere, I just said, if I could resign now, I would. And then I had this massive light bulb moment, and I didn't reveal it to people at the time. I didn't like say it out loud, but I was like, and we can swear on your show, right?
Oh yeah, go crazy.
Cool. So I piped up, like, if I could resign now, I would. And then suddenly I was like, holy shit, I can.
Right.
Because my bursary had ended, so technically I could do whatever. And I was like, I actually can do what I want. And building up to this, so I left this part out before, but building up to this, I started interested in health and sort of fitness and nutrition. And I started reading up after a friend of mine spoke about sort of the paleo diet and CrossFit when that sort of popped up, when that first came around. So I started reading more about that, and then I went to Thailand. So now this is just a little bit of a rewind. So 2012, then I went to Thailand with a group of friends, and that was my first encounter with actually like traveling. I mean, I'd been on family holidays, but that was really my first encounter with seeing more of the world on my own. And so that planted that seed of like, there's so much more out there. And then combined with this, like reading up more about health and coming across blogs in general, because I never really spent much time online before that. And then, one site led to another, and we, how we link up. And I came across Scott Dinsmore's TED Talk, How to Find and Do Work You Love, which, I mean, I'm sure we can link to that in the show notes. It's an amazing video. And so coming across all these people that were, on Live Your Legend, on that website, people that were finding and doing things that made them come alive. And I started expanding my beliefs of what's possible. And so the combining of the travel and reading up more about these people that had done these things, and then realizing that I didn't feel fulfilled at work, and that's actually okay. It doesn't have to be that way. That reached this point where I was like, holy shit, I can resign if I want now.
Right.
And the one thing then that kept me back was wondering what my parents would say, because my parents were both really old school, and they'd done an amazing job bringing us up and put us through 4 years of university. And I was super grateful, still am super grateful of my upbringing and my family. And I was like, well, what is my dad especially, like, what is he going to say if I suddenly tell him I don't want to work at this place anymore? And anyway, so about 2 weeks after this light bulb moment, I just couldn't take it anymore. And I sent him a message while I was at work. And I said, Dad, I think there's something I need to tell you. I think you might know what it is, because, I mean, my family had already said to me that they noticed I wasn't being my usual happy, cheerful self.
Right.
And he said to him, I'm thinking of resigning. And, rather than I'd prepared myself for the worst. What are you talking about? And are you crazy? And rather than that, he actually took the business side of things, the business point of view. Whereas, he'd been a director of a couple of businesses before he retired, but he actually said, well, if you're not adding value to the business, or you're not enjoying it and you're not having fun, the honorable thing to do is to resign. But too many people don't, because it's just a paycheck at the end of the month.
Right.
But by going to a job just because of the paycheck, you're not helping yourself, and you're also not helping the business.
Wow. And Bryan, just to pause you there for a second, because that, I think, is a critical point, is that we often think like, oh, well, what about me? What about this? What about that? If we're not considering the impact it's having to the business, because when you're not engaged and excited and motivated and connected to the work that you're doing, to the thing or product that you're working with, you do suboptimal work. When you're not putting yourself in an optimal place, in an environment that inspires and excites you, you're doing subpar work that continues to hold you back. And one of my favorite quotes is, how you do anything is how you do everything. And if we're doing this one item in our life, let's say work, where we spend at minimum 40 hours a week, if we're doing that half-assed, then all of a sudden we start to get dragged down in the other things. If you're building a business on the side, or if you're writing a book or whatever, you're getting used to that default level of effort, and even your workouts and things can suffer. So I think your dad, that was a hugely insightful point and so important to realize. And one question before we continue that I was very curious to learn. You said it was a dress-up party when you had this realization. How were you dressed when you had this realization?
So I've got a twin brother, and obviously we shared the birthday party. So his name's Andrew, so it's Andrew and Bryan, A and B. Guess who came first? And so the theme was you had to dress as something with an A or a B. So I was dressed as a boxer with my boxing gloves on, my boxing shorts.
Okay. And what was he?
Gloves and all. Cool. What was he? Man, I can't actually remember what he was.
See, that's actually, as I'm thinking about it, that's kind of a perfect thing to be wearing, because you're about to fight for your life. You're about to fight for your dreams. So that's a perfect metaphor. You planned that, man. That's not even fair.
Man, I've never even thought about that. But the gloves were off. They were around my neck. My wrists and my knuckles were strapped. So yeah, I think I was ready for Batman.
There you go, man. The gloves were off. You were done playing by the rules. You were about to just go bare knuckle in there. So yeah, see, that could be a book title or something. You could put the boxer in there. I like that. But all right, so
I love it.
As a boxer, you have this realization, and another key point of that story, I think, is the fear of what other people will say. And Philip McKiernan has an amazing speech called The Authenticity Code that he did at Awesomeness Fest, where he talks about people want validation and this love and connection more than they want to be happy. So they want to be accepted and appreciated, and they will do things they hate their whole life in order to try and get that acceptance, and wind up at the end of their life like, I lived for someone else my whole life. He talks about a girl who played in the Olympic soccer team in Canada and was world class, and they won everything. And it all came down to, she had done this her whole life to get her father's love, and she never got it. And so I find so many people, we all do this at some point, but we sit there and we try to live in a way that will get us acceptance or validation or approval, or we try to play inside the lines and not push other people out of their comfort zone by the way we live. And then in that same way, how you do anything is how you do everything. You're holding back from expressing yourself fully. So by you taking this very brave step and coming out and just saying, Dad, this is what I really want to do, this is who I am, and this is what I feel, you weren't met with the resistance that you expected. You were met with appreciation and also a very pragmatic business approach. So can you tell us a bit about the next steps that came after you said, Dad, I'm done? He said, you're right. If you're not giving them value, find a way to give value. So what came next after that?
Totally, and yeah, it's so valid what you mentioned about like looking for people's approval. And it's something that's probably my big Achilles heel, is like always wanting to know that people, even to this day, wondering what people will think. But then I just have to remind myself, one of the biggest realizations I had in that period was. And I kind of want to sort of trademark this, but I said, no one's going to make your life awesome for you. There's not someone sitting there waiting, being like, oh, I can't wait to make Brian's life awesome.
Right.
And I don't, like, whether that's me, Brian, or you, Brian, no one's sitting there waiting to do whatever they can for our lives to be awesome. If we really want something, it's up to us to go and get it. And it's, you can't just lie back and say like, oh, I don't have what I want in life, and that's it. Right.
And Brian, just one thing before, because one thing that has been hugely helpful for me because we all get those moments of, oh, my message isn't good enough, or I'm not really impacting people, or who am I to tell people how to live their lives? How could I really? It's just this negative voice that's holding us back. And again, John Stevenson, because he's had such a huge impact on my life, at one of his events, he talked about an acronym STAY, and I think this is something that's really powerful. Hopefully it can help you in those times where it gets tough, because it helps me a lot. But the acronym STAY, stop thinking it's about you. And what Sean says is, if you have something that could benefit the world, whether it be information or a product that could help solve a difficult problem in someone's life, and you hold back due to fear or worried about being judgments, it's a disservice to humanity. And so those times when I'm really down on myself and I'm fearful and I'm worried about judgment and what if people don't like me, because again, this is that fear of being authentic and being judged for who you really are, then I remember that and I'm like, if there's somebody that could benefit and needs to hear this, if there's somebody that's feeling alone right now and could hear this message and be touched and be inspired, that's what it's about. It's not about getting everyone's approval. It's about being authentically me. So I thought maybe that could be something that could be helpful. The STAY acronym has made a huge difference for me. So, all right, now let's continue with the story. Dad gives you...
Thanks so much.
Absolutely. Wherever I can help, I'll try to. So Dad gives you the lesson, and you so what are your next steps there?
Yeah, so, and just to be clear, yeah, I didn't have like an idea of what I was going to do. I didn't have a side business going or like a passion project that I was building up on the side. And there's that saying, like, the thing that you spend your time procrastinating on is probably the thing you should be spending all your time on.
Yep.
And I don't know like how true that is, but definitely to an extent. And I mean, I was at work sort of trying to hide that I was reading health blogs and personal development stuff while I was supposed to be working. So if my boss is listening to this, sorry, Chris. But anyway, so I had this chat with my dad, and I'm like, holy crap, I'm actually going to do this. And 30 minutes after my dad mentioned that to me, I'd handed in my letter of resignation.
Wow.
So I didn't wait long. That's why I say I think I was just waiting for that approval from my dad, like, it's okay. And what he said, in addition to that whole business perspective, is, he said, Mom and I support whatever you decide to do. We know you'll make the right decision, and if this is what you want to do, then we've got your back, basically.
Wow.
And as soon as I had that approval, I was like, man, I've got to do this. So wrote up my letter of resignation, handed it in to my boss, who was pretty shocked, but he was also quite supportive, and he said, there were points in his career where he had to make some decisions and move on based on his personal situation, and he didn't hold anything against me and wish me well and all of that. So I obviously worked out the last month, which was April 2014. And like I said, I didn't have a plan B. I didn't know what I was going to go into. I didn't have another job lined up. And because I loved that experience of traveling to Thailand with my, I think it was, there were 4 of us, so my 3 buddies and I thought maybe I can do that. And I was it was Father's Day now, and my dad mentioned, well, are you going to go traveling? And I'd never paid a lot of thought to it or considered it that much, but when he said that, I was like, shit, maybe I will. And anyway, so I think he probably thought I'd go to Europe for 2 weeks, but I ended up going to Southeast Asia for 2 months on my own. I literally just had a sort of hand luggage with me for 2 months, so I didn't have to check in a bag or anything, which was highly recommended if anyone listening to this is planning on going overseas for traveling purposes. But anyway, so went overseas for 2 months, had some money saved up, so I had a couple of months worth of money to live off. And that was in itself really life-changing, and I kind of realized that what I really wanted to do was in the personal development space, and helping others sort of, it's so cliched now, but be their best selves, if you will. And I came back and started working as a personal trainer. I got certified to do that and started training some clients. But what I realized then was, and through this whole process, which we touched on in your interview on my show, I never really knew how things would pan out going on, but I just kept taking the next steps. And so I did personal training, and then I realized health is one small part, fitness is one small part of the health equation. So I got way more into nutrition and started doing more health coaching type stuff, and started a blog around that. That was my first blog. And then near the end so I did that I did the personal training for about 6 months. And then 2015, the first half of the year, I focused on my blog, and I did some, odd jobs to kind of pave the way. I did some modeling stuff. I was actually in an episode of South Park, which is pretty great.
No, whoa, okay, hang on, wait, we can't glaze over that. What episode and how?
So I think it was episode. So I don't really watch South Park, but all my friends told me about it.
That's even funnier. Okay.
I think it was. What's the latest season? Season 19.
I'm not sure about the season, but go ahead. If you tell me the episode, I bet I'll know.
So I think it's season 19, episode 3, or something like that.
Okay.
And I don't watch the show, so I don't know much about it. But I'd done some stock video stuff, and then they obviously picked up the video to use in the episode. So I was in South Park.
Wow.
And anyway, so
Dude, that's
so
awesome.
I did some, random jobs along the way to supplement the personal training income and the blogging stuff. And then, the last half of 2015, I started personal training again. But by that stage, my blog had become less so much about just health, because just as, personal training is only a small part of health is only a small part of living a sort of a rich, fulfilling life. And that was more what I was really into, sort of life coaching, for lack of a better term. But so my blog started going towards that. And then, by the end of 2015, I'd started looking into podcasting, and I did actually have another podcast before, which was pretty much about just learning the ropes and getting used to podcasting. And then this year, 2016, I decided to rebrand under my personal brand, BryanTeare.com, which also allowed me to talk about a wider variety of topics. And then I also launched the podcast, which is my main project focus at the moment, the Quarter Life Comeback. And same sort of mission as what you're going for with Overcoming Graduation. So interviewing people in 3 kind of categories. It's either experts related to something that quarter lifers could benefit from, be that like relationship experts or money experts or career experts, anything like that. The second type of guest is mentor figures, because mentoring is, I think mentoring is huge, and a lot of people maybe don't have access to a mentor or don't think they do. So I try to give that sort of angle. And then people that have come through their own sort of quarter life crisis and sort of success stories. People that are now doing, have made a change for themselves and living a life that's true to them, and spreading that message to others that it is possible, and it's not as hard as we think.
Well, that is wonderful. That's part of the reason I was so excited to talk to you. I'm reading through your site. I was like, I know, man, I'm reading things, I'm nodding, and I'm like, I know exactly those same feelings. I have that. So I know there's tons of people doing that as well. And I'm really excited to see as Quarter Life Comeback grows, more of the impacts and everything. And I'm excited to have you on the show, because it's just, you're another great resource for the listeners of a person who's living this. If you want to hear the South African accent of a guy who did some modeling, again, dude, be careful. There's going to be all kinds of female listeners coming at you. But it's like, what's that?
No, I was going to say +2783.
The number is, and you can find me on Facebook, but it's great to see somebody else who is living it, who is working towards this amazing thing. I loved the journey. Now, one of the biggest things that came through about your journey, and so many people have this challenge, is they say, well, how am I going to do it? And what many of my mentors have said, focus on the what and the why, not the how and the when. So what it is you want to do and why you want to do it, because that's what's going to drive you through the shitty days, the days where you don't feel like doing it. The how and the when is something that you figure out as a result of action. So like Bryan said, he just decided to leave his job. He had no plan B, but then he really started to work and dive into himself and what types of things bring him the most joy, and then step by step found a way to make that next progression happen. So like he said, there were some odd jobs he had to do in order to keep this going. He had to take on a personal training responsibility to help that grow. But as all of these separate pieces happen, the amalgamation of everything turns into this growth, this development, and as a result of his action, he got clarity on what it is he wanted to do. And that's one of my mentor Peter Scott's favorite quotes, is that clarity is not a requirement for taking action, it is a result of taking action, something I had said on Bryan's show earlier, because it is so critical to try, to start, to experiment, because if you don't have clarity on where you want to go, you need to start trying and experimenting with things now, and all of a sudden when you try this one thing, that excitement is going to trigger inside of you and bring you all of this joy, and you're going to say, okay, maybe let me do more of that, and just continue to bring more of those types of items into your life. So Bryan, that the story is amazing, the progression, and what I think is also fascinating is it's such a short time in the grand scheme of things, how much you've been able to accomplish. And you and I both are avid travelers. We think it's just one of the most beautiful things. Can you tell us a bit about some of the biggest lessons you got from travel? Because if there is one thing I can encourage people to do, travel would probably be number one, because it was what changed my life originally and opened my mind to just new ways of living and new people. So can you share a few of your biggest takeaways from the traveling that you've done?
Absolutely. And just before I get to that, for people listening, I'm still very much in this journey, and I've by no means got everything figured out. There's still months that go by where I'm like, man, I'm gonna pay the bills. But it's just like knowing what you want and then just focusing on that very next small step. And you don't have to have everything figured out. Yeah. But anyway, lessons from traveling. I think the first thing that really came to my mind when I went on that first adventure with my friends before my solo travel, which, I would say solo travel is even one step further than traveling with friends. But the very first thing was, there's so much more out there. And it's so easy to get caught up in our own small world or our little bubble of the environment around us, and to get stuck in patterns and habits and routines. And in reality, there's so much out there. And at the same time, I think how that corresponds to a lesson or the real world is there's so many ways to do things. There's no one right path.
Right. And
how things are supposed to be, no. It doesn't at all. There are so many different ways to do things and so many different things to do. So if you have something that you feel is the thing that you need to do, but you can't quite figure out how to do it, there are people that have done it. And there's a cool saying, if you're 1 in a million, it means there's 7,000 other people like you.
That's awesome. I've never heard that.
Yeah. So, that was the first thing. It's there's no one path, and there's so much more out there. Another thing that I learned is, people are inherently good and people want to help. And I think we mentioned it briefly on my show, I think, is the media paints this picture of the fact that there's so much negative stuff going on in the world. And I know you said the same thing on my show. I don't watch the news anymore. I've just decided that I don't need that negativity in my mind. And when you actually go, so when I went traveling solo, it was in the middle of the military coup and the curfew in Thailand.
Wow.
And we were in Bangkok, and yeah, there were soldiers on the streets, and I'm not discounting any of the stuff that the people went through, but it was not at all like the media painted it out to be. And I think especially for tourists, I never came across any troubles at all. And I just noticed like people are inherently good and people want to help. So that was another thing. And I don't know, I'm trying to think for more lessons here. I've never really given it much thought, but just the fact that you also, so this is probably the biggest one, right? So you realize what you are capable of. And I think this is especially true if you're traveling on your own. You realize what you are capable of, what your limits are and what your skills are, and how to function on your own, how to be independent. You make things happen. And that was probably the biggest lesson for me. It's just realizing that you can make things happen on your own.
Right. And I think one of the biggest things for me, it was first getting out of my bubble. It was seeing that the world operates different in different places, and things that I had never had a reason to question before. Suddenly I was like, why do we do it like that? Like, this is actually way better. I like this way of doing things, or this way of eating, or this daily schedule. And the whole concept of you can do more than you believe, it's only by pushing ourselves outside our comfort zone that we're ever going to introduce ourselves to those abilities, to that strength, to that clarity. And guys, it's not easy at times. There are challenges that come as a result, but taking on these challenges, not just travel, but doing the things you love and striking out and talking to that person that you've always wanted to talk to, it's only by doing that we're ever going to experience a reality different than the world we're living in now. So by taking that, Bryan introduced himself to so much more strength and resolve and capability that he didn't even know he had. And it is hugely empowering when you get back to your quote-unquote real life, which everything we're doing is real life, but when you get back to the world outside of traveling. And if you had one country recommendation to give, did you spend all of your time in Thailand, or did you bounce around Southeast Asia?
Yeah, so and just one caveat on what I said you're capable of doing things on your own. I don't mean that you should try and do everything on your own. I think there's really value in reaching out and asking for help. But what I mean is, like, you don't need to rely on other people to do what you want.
Right.
So on the traveling stuff, a recommendation. The route I went Thailand, Laos, as I think you guys in America say, and then Vietnam and Cambodia.
Okay.
So I did the big ring. I have to say Vietnam was absolutely amazing. It's a huge country. There's so much to do there. And just like great food, and it's really cheap, which is always helpful. So Vietnam was probably the favorite country, but in terms of sites and tourist attractions, the Angkor Wat temples in Cambodia were mind-blowing. That was just seeing the sunrise over Angkor Wat, which is the world's largest religious monument. That was really amazing, and something that that and like other places that I'd looked at before I went, seeing them on Google on your laptop and then actually being there in person was pretty surreal. So yeah, I mean, from my travels, and they're by no means nearly done, but Vietnam was a great country, and then Angkor Wat I would really want everyone to see once in their lifetime.
I think what you said is so important, because in this information age, there is so much benefit that can come from it, but also a sense of kind of people getting desensitized. Like, oh, I've seen the Eiffel Tower on the computer. I know what it looks like. Why do I need to travel there? But the experience of seeing these things in person and walking the streets in these different countries and feeling the atmosphere, it's not something you can replicate through a computer. So I'm such a huge advocate of people getting out and traveling, and that's why I always like to get new recommendations, because I have been to Asia. but I have not yet been to Southeast Asia, so it's even a little selfish on my part, but so.
Yeah, and the other thing, sorry, just to cut in is, and I guess this is probably a lesson too, is so it's kind of two things, but I'm going to sneak them in anyway. So when you're traveling, you also realize the first thing is that a lot of the things that bother you at home are really so small and meaningless. Mm-hmm. Like, when you're traveling and seeing how different people do things differently, you're like, well, that's actually really cool.
Yeah.
And then the other side of that is when you get home, you appreciate what you have so much more. Mm-hmm. And it's a lot easier to be grateful for things when you've taken some time away from them and then return to them again. Even things like, having clean water to drink, or the fact that the weather is the way it is, or that you have access to technology whenever you want it. So like tiny things like that it's so easy to skip over, but that are actually such a blessing of living where you live.
Yeah, I'm a person who really loves to break out of my comfort zone, and constantly I'm pushing to do it. But there's also times I know I need to return to my comfort zone and kind of recharge, get the batteries back, and then you're recognizing like it's kind of nice to be able to speak the language here and be completely understood. It's nice to not have certain challenges with travel. But then very quickly, I think people like you and I are like, okay, now I want more of that. Because, yeah, you have those challenges, but you have all these other amazing experiences and growth that come along with it as a result of taking that step. So now that you are into developing Quarter Life Comeback, what are some of the next steps that you're looking to take? Because I think this is a really fun thing to do with people that are kicking off a business, that are into the early years of it, because this is something you can come back to later and be like, wow, okay, look at all these things that happened after I said that. So I'm curious to hear, what are some of your big goals or your next steps that are coming for Quarter Life Comeback?
Yeah, I'm glad you asked, and I don't know, my answer might be a little bit boring, but so basically with my old blog and the old stuff that I was doing, I was trying to speak to everyone about everything and to try and do everything at once, and it kind of diluted a lot of my efforts. Mm-hmm. And so one of my themes, for the Quarter Life Comeback and BryanTeare.com, I've been a lot more niche with who I'm speaking to and what I'm speaking about. But some of my bigger themes for the year is to focus on one thing at a time. Mm-hmm. So really, I mean, I've got a list of projects like the length of my arm, and I'm 6'7", so I've got a long arm.
Oh my God! Wow, dude.
Yeah, I'm a large individual. Anyway, so I have a list of like projects that I want to roll out in time, but at the moment I'm really focusing on growing the podcast. And if you guys love my accent or the interview that I do with Bryan for my show, but yeah, really focusing on the podcast and growing that and building an audience and listening to that audience and finding out how I can further serve and improve the experience for listeners and readers. And then also working on my coaching, so working one-on-one with people, helping them get clear on what they do want and their next steps and that sort of thing. Mm-hmm. And then there is a project that I have in mind towards the end of the year, but I haven't really revealed that to anyone yet. So I don't know if I want to reveal that yet. That's
all right. We'll keep it under wraps, and when it, because I think I know what you're talking about. When it comes to be, we can do another episode and help you promote it.
Cool. Yeah, and then I mean the other things that I've got lined up is I'd love to write a book one day, and how I plan to do that, well, at least the first book I write is to gather all the wisdom and knowledge and experience of people that have been on my show and compile it into a book, kind of like what Lewis Howes has done with the School of Greatness, mm-hmm. Which is, I mean, he's one of my role models online and a big inspiration for my podcast. So there's the book, and I'd love to run some sort of like Quarter Life camp retreat. And all that sort of good stuff. I'd love to shoot a documentary one day, sort of exposing people that have really cool quarter life crisis stories. So I mean, there's everything you can think about, but it's just one step at a time.
And I think what you said is so important, especially for anybody who's in this type of space who has lots of ideas, what can end up happening is we have so many ideas and we want to work at all of them at the same time. So we're putting a little bit of time and effort into each one every day or every week. And what ends up happening is it's so much easier to get to burnout because you end up making a little bit of progress in a lot of things, but not getting anything to a state of completion or where it can be released to the world. So focusing your efforts is one of the most critical, your efforts and your attention, because it's so easy to just get distracted and think, oh, I need to read another book before that comes out, or I need to watch another video. But when you're able to hone your focus, be very diligent about reviewing, editing, getting this thing done, and then release it out to the world, then you can focus your attention on the next thing. Now, I'm not saying it's impossible to shift focus. I definitely do some shifting, but whenever I'm working on one thing, I work to put as much attention and focus on that thing as I can before shifting gears to something else. So it's like we talked about earlier. I think that is such a powerful approach in a world that's all about multitasking and you can do a billion things at once, but you end up doing a billion things poorly rather than one thing really great. And especially when you're working to bring this massive message to the world and change people's lives, you want to be able to have that focus to really provide the most massive impact you can. So that's great goals, man. I'm excited to see what comes from this year, because I think that getting that focus in will make a huge difference, and you're going to take leaps and bounds this year. Now, another thing that we've talked about both in the interview we did prior and in this show is that mentorship is key. So can you talk a bit about who are some of your best mentors, whether they be people you've worked with or just people you learned from, and what are your recommendations to millennials in terms of how to connect with these amazing people in the world that they want to get to know?
Sorry, Brian, we broke up for a sec there. I just heard the beginning. You said, who are some of the mentors? And then you kind of went blank.
Okay. Yeah, we've had a couple of, we are all the way from North Carolina to South Africa, so the quality's been pretty good in spite of that. But I asked, who are some of the most important or biggest mentors in your life? People that you either met and have worked with, or people that you just consume their content, listen to their videos, etc. And what are some of your best recommendations to help young adults connect with these mentors that inspire them and touch their lives?
Yeah, thanks so much for the question, because I'm really passionate about the topic of mentorship, and from a selfish point of view, I think it's a crucial stepping stone to getting to where you want to go.
Yep.
And another thing about mentorship is I think people have this idea that it needs to be this super sort of formal, flashy thing, like this is my mentor. But a mentor can simply be someone who's in the space that you want to be in and who you'd like to emulate, or sort of not copy, but whose success you would like to achieve. And so, that could be as simple as a podcast host or a blogger or a TED speaker. Some of my mentors, I have an in-person mentor who I don't think I've ever said to him, like, will you be my mentor? But every couple of months I'll go have lunch with him and shoot some ideas at him. And I think the important thing with mentorship as well is know what you want to learn, and once you have answers to those questions, like, actually go and implement the stuff, because A, that's going to make the mentor feel great and want to help you more in future if he knows you're actually taking action on what he says. But B, if you're just like shooting questions at someone and not doing anything with it, like, what is the point just to say you have a mentor?
Right.
So I have a couple of in-person mentors, and then obviously guys online who are doing things I'd love to achieve one day and just learning from them. So guys like Brian Johnson,
Philosopher's
who
Notes.
runs, I think it's called Brian Johnson's Optimal Living 101 program. Guys like Jacob Sokol from Sensophy, and then people like Brendan Bouchard and Robin Sharma to an extent as well. I just love the stuff they're putting out. And those are the ones that come to mind straight away.
And those are...
But
go ahead.
No, I was going to say, like, I'll often come across someone new who I think, well, they're doing really cool things, or I really resonate with their message. And then I keep a spreadsheet with people. I kind of call them influencers, which is kind of mentors and that sort of thing. And then, so we touched on, tips for mentorship and that sort of thing. And we spoke about this in my show as well, but reach out to those people and start building a relationship before you ask for anything in return, or before you need to ask for anything in return. So just look for where you can add value. And a lot of the time people will be like, well, I'm only 25 or whatever age, like what value can I possibly add to, like, I don't know, let's use your buddy, Sean Stevenson. Like, how could I possibly add value to Sean Stevenson? But everybody has something that they need from, or could use from someone else, be it a review on their podcast, or which is a definite hint, a review on a podcast, or sharing their latest blog post, or, little things like that, commenting on an article they wrote. Start building that relationship early, and then, add value, reach out to them, reply. You'll be surprised how open and willing people are to get in touch and reply to your emails. And just start building that relationship. And when it comes to a point where you do need something, just drop a casual email and say, I loved XYZ that you put out. I had a question regarding this. This is what I've been trying. I would love to get your opinion. Something like that. And I think a lot of the time that'll probably put people off, because it seems like a time requirement. But if you just drop a little email and say, I've tried this, that, and this, which would you recommend, or what do you think? And just see what comes from it.
So I think what you said is so impactful. And actually, Donna did come by. And for all the show listeners, that's the train that comes by. She was actually way quieter than normal, though. So she's more normally much louder, and it's much more apparent. But for anyone new to the show, Donna is the train that comes by. I live right by the train track, so it's part of the show. And when Donna comes by, she likes to promote my guests. So to learn more about Bryan and the amazing work that he's doing, you can visit bryanteare.com. It's BRYANTEARE.com. And of course, that'll be linked in the show notes. So, got that plug-in from Donna. Thank you, Donna. Now, Bryan, to continue.
Thanks, Dee.
Yeah, she's awesome. We love her here. But one of my best employees never asks a thing in return. So, I literally have 0 employees here. So yeah, thank you, Donna. So what I loved what you said about that is know what you want to learn. I think that is such a key thing, because when you come in and you say, I want to learn how to do good, you're not setting your mentor up for success. Because if someone came to me and said, Bryan, I want to get good at podcasting, I'd be like, okay, what area? What do you need to learn the most right now? What is it that would help you accelerate results the fastest? What's the biggest obstacle? So the more specific you can get in these questions, the better. And to Bryan's point, invest in their content, take action. That's the biggest thing. Apply what they've put out there. So most of these people have tons of free content that they want people to consume and try, and then that's ultimately something that should drive enough value that they go, I want to invest in the programs. So if you're saying, all right, I tried this, I did that, what should I do next? Then they know you've invested time and energy in them. Now, the other key piece is when you're reaching out, to Bryan's point, we often as young adults, me being 26, Bryan being 27, we do a lot of reaching out. We run podcasts, so we want to connect with these amazing people, and we're afraid of, what value could I really bring? Because we have this kind of misconstrued idea of value that it's only money or helping somebody else make more money. Now, having met many of these big people that we look up to, I've found that the feedback and the interaction is so valuable to them when they see that people are consuming their information and applying the lessons and then engaging in their community and their tribe. If Gary Vaynerchuk, for example, sees you sharing every one of his episodes, you would be amazed how integrated these people are. It's not like business in the past where there's this big, powerful CEO and he doesn't see what's going on at the lower levels in a lot of cases. these people are living it. They're in their social media. They want to meet their people. They want to connect with you. So your feedback, your energy, your time, offering to help them in any way you can, there's so many ways for you to provide value that most of us don't even consider. So Bryan, so glad you brought that up. And I agree. Mentorship has been a total game changer for me, both in my more formal mentorship in terms of like actually hiring a coach, but also in the informal mentorship. And that's another piece before we go to the next question that I'd like to hit on. I, like many people, when I graduated, I was like, I don't have enough money to hire, a mentor and spend $1,000 a month or whatever number you want to call. I was like, I financially can't do that right now. And I'm not a person who's like, well, I'll just go into more debt and make that happen. So the idea was, how can I do this? And you mentioned Bryan Johnson, and I think we're talking about the same Bryan Johnson who wrote Philosopher's Notes. Is that right?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, man.
Yeah, he's a fantastic guy. And so he said he quit, he sold a company he built, he went to Bali, and he spent a year sitting on the beach reading all of the best books that everyone's ever recommended and taking notes and collecting the information. And so he said, I spent every day with the world's best mentors. And that was a big click and mindset shift for me, is that although I'd love to meet them in person, I can still benefit from their teaching and from their coaching in the books they've written, in the videos they've recorded, in the podcast they've recorded, because they did this so that people could benefit from what they've learned. So you may not be at a point where you can afford a formal mentorship, but to Bryan's earlier point, there's a lot of ways to connect, and maybe someone doesn't want you to pay, but wants your great graphic design work, or you do great audio editing and you can help them out and build that relationship. So awesome stuff there, Bryan. Now, we're getting close to the end here, and I have 2 questions I ask. And this first question...
Oh, man.
Yeah, I know, right? It goes pretty quick, doesn't it?
Yeah, I'm having fun, man.
Well, that's the goal. And Bryan, is this your first interview? Like, first time you've been interviewed?
I think it is, yeah. So you've you've popped my interview cherry.
Well, I was going to say, one, it doesn't seem like it because you... I've done a great job in the interview. So first off, hats off to you, because you're very comfortable. You're providing a ton of value for my audience and giving great lessons. So I really appreciate that. And now the closing 2 questions. So first one, and it's a little interesting depending on who I have on my show, because I have people who have, in some people's definitions, made it. They're in their 50s and they've done these amazing things, but they're still working and growing. Or we have people that are like us, that are in it right now, that are figuring things out, that feel lost a lot, but are going to keep working forward. So one of the first question I ask is, many people, and it kind of hits on what we were just discussing, but many people see themselves as a millennial and see themselves as not being good enough or not having any value to provide. They think that they need to hit those items that are on the job requirements, that they need 3 years of experience to be taken seriously. So what is it that you see as the main value that millennials provide to the world?
Man, so I'm just gonna go with the first thing that came to mind.
Yep.
There's a quote, and I can't remember who it's by. I think it might be Howard Thurman, and he said, "Don't ask what the world needs. Ask what makes you come alive, because what the world needs is more people who have come alive." Mm-hmm. And I think that's what we're seeing with our generation, is that people are more willing to think for themselves and do things differently and break out of that norm. The typical way that society has told us. And I know on my show you mentioned, we keep cross-referencing each other, but I know on my show you mentioned, before the days of the influence all around us were doing. Whereas today we're so blessed to have technology and exposure to different opportunities and possibilities. And I think that's what the millennials can bring to the world, is that we are now asking the questions like, what am I passionate about, and what do I really want to do? And I think there's a big shift towards like conscious capitalism and adding value as opposed to just me. I know Smiley Pozwalski, who Zephan put me in touch with, I think he's going to come on my show. Well, Smiley, this is a statement. I will interview for my show.
There you go.
But he wrote a book called The Quarter Life Breakthrough, which is a name I actually considered at a stage, but now I'm glad I didn't. But in his talks, and he's got a TED talk as well on the quarter life crisis, and he mentions we are not the me generation, we are the purpose generation. And I hope I'm not butchering that, but I think that's what the millennials bring, is this sort of increased awareness and drive to do things differently and to add value to the world. So yeah, that's probably what I would say is our biggest plus.
I totally agree. And what some interesting conversations I've had recently are around that topic of older generations being frustrated with millennials. And I've talked with a lot of people about it, because there are those stereotypes that we're looking for handouts, that we don't want to work as hard, that we're not doing things the way they're supposed to be done. Now, naturally, there's going to be exceptions, and there's going to be people that abide to that. But in general, I was just talking to my dad the other day, and he was like, Bryan, like, it happens to everybody. Like, every generation is disliked in some way by the older generation. They don't like, that darn rock music that they're playing, or these kids these days don't work as hard, or whatever. There's always going to be judgment, and some of it may be accurate, and some of it may just be older ideas about how the world is supposed to work, and people not being open to be flexible and say, okay, maybe what I believed all this time can be different. So it's the whole quote, like, you're going to be judged either way, so you might as well do what you love. If people are going to call you out and say it's not right, it's not legit, if you're providing value for the world, if you are providing your unique, beautiful message, that's what's important, and that's the key piece. So don't get deterred by the haters or the negative people out there. They're always going to be out there, and hopefully the messages that you bring can touch their lives. So love that one.
Yeah, and there's that.
Oh yeah, go ahead.
There's that other quote. There's that other quote about, people won't remember what you said or did, but they will remember how you made them feel.
Absolutely.
So that kind of ties into what you just said as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's one of my favorite quotes too, because it's so easy to just think that we're really not touching people. We go through our day with our head down. We just pass by the checkout clerk. We pass by the person here. We pass by the person working at the cafeteria, and don't even connect. Whereas if you take those 5 seconds to connect with each person you meet, you'd be amazed how much more enriching and fulfilling your life feels as a result. So love that one, Bryan. Now, the final and closing question. It's something that's been in the show since the start. That first question is a fairly new addition, but this question is, and it's interesting because it's fairly recent for you, is if you could go back and talk to yourself at college graduation, when you're at that stage of you're about to step into the real world, what advice would you give yourself if you could go back knowing everything you know now?
Again, I'm going to go with gut feel, and the first thing that popped in my head. And I can't remember now if it was on my show or your show, but when I think back to when I was in university and going through, it was on your show, I just remember, going through my studies and thinking like, well, I'm not really like inspired or fulfilled here, but this must just be what things are like. I think that should have possibly been a clue that maybe I wasn't in alignment with my values and wasn't quite on the right track. Mm-hmm. And I don't regret anything at all. I think everything has led to where I am now, so I'm stoked for that. But I think that's the biggest thing that I would say is feeling fulfilled or anything. Like, don't just accept that is the way things are. And also don't stop exploring what does make you feel fulfilled. I really get really, really passionate about this topic of creating a life that makes you excited. And at times it won't be easy. And I mean, there's still days in my own life, and I'm sure yours too, Bryan, where you're like, how the hell is this going to work out? Or like, where am I going to end up? you don't need to have everything figured out, and just know what you kind of want, and that'll change over time, but just have some idea of a vision. And I would even, write out a 5-year plan and break that down into what needs to get done, in 1 year, or each quarter, each month, each week, and just keep taking those small steps, and just know that, you don't have to have everything figured out, but just keep moving towards what it is you truly want. And even if it's, even if people around you don't agree with it, or aren't on that same path, or don't have that same vision, like I said earlier, no one's going to make your life awesome for you. So just know that if you're feeling like there's more for you in life, then know that is definitely the case. There is nothing stopping you from creating whatever it is that you want. So yeah, man, I just threw in all the all the life coaching cliches there. But, that's probably what I would say if I had to speak to my previous self.
Well, I think those are really powerful messages, and I know sometimes people get caught up like, oh, that could be a cliche, but the thing is, oftentimes these cliches, when applied appropriately, can really help a person live a better life. Oftentimes the reason they become what we define as a cliche, which is something people say but there's no action taken, it's because people are afraid to apply that and see how it works for them. So if people applied the things that you just said to their lives, of listening to your intuition and what's bringing you joy, of taking action, of stepping out of your comfort zone and being willing to not know everything that's coming next, if people do that more, they're going to find themselves living in a reality that's unrecognizable from the one they're in now. But it comes from taking those first steps. So love the message. And Bryan, it has been a total pleasure having you on. I've never done a back-to-back interview of an interviewee, so this has been really cool. So first off, thank you so much for being on the show today.
Bryan, I can't agree more. It's been super cool, and yeah, thank you for coming on my show, which I hope people will go check out. And it's been a pleasure being on your show. And I don't know where this interview is going after this question, but I do have a gift to offer your listeners, if that's cool.
Absolutely, please do.
Cool. So one of the biggest things is getting clear on what you do want, and oftentimes that's what keeps us back, is this overwhelm or confusion. But I've put together a little ebook which has 5 exercises in it for basically getting clear on who you are, what you want, and why you're here. And you can get that at bryanteare.com/OCG for Overcoming Graduation. So that's bryanteare.com/OCG. And you can pick up a free copy of that ebook over there.
Fantastic, man. And like you said on my show, I'm going to check that out and fill that out for myself, because that sounds fantastic. And I think doing these activities more and looking at different perspectives and getting these things from different people can help you get more clarity. So thank you for offering that to my audience. And the only other question I have, which I think we may have just answered, is there, since people I'm sure are going to want to come and learn more about you and what you're doing, we've talked about bryanteare.com, we've talked about bryanteare.com/OCG to get access to that amazing content. Are there any other areas or places that people can come to connect with you?
No, so I said I'm just working on one thing at a time, and for me right now that's the podcast. So if you guys go over to bryanteare.com, you'll be able to find that. Otherwise, on iTunes, just search for not Overcoming Graduation, the Quarter Life Comeback, and that's also on Stitcher as well. But if you like that show, I'd appreciate if you just give a little rating and review on iTunes. As Bryan will know too, that really does help more people find the content. And I mean, whether it's my show or Bryan's show or anyone else's show, this message and this work needs to get out there. So share it around with your friends. I'm also on social media pretty much everywhere at Bryan Teare. And again, that's BRYANTEARE. But yeah, on the Facebook and the Twitter and Instagram and all that good stuff. So yeah, I look forward to connecting with anyone. And if you guys do have any questions, please get hold of me. My email is bryan@bryanteare.com, and I'd love to, whether it's a question, something you want to learn, or just saying hi, I'd love to hear from you. So yeah.
Perfect, man. And for anyone who does reach out, please do. Guys like me and Bryan love to hear from you. We love the feedback. We love the connection. So if you do reach out, let him know you heard about him from the show. That would make both of us very happy. And to wrap up for today, thank you all for listening. As always, you can subscribe to the Overcoming Graduation podcast on iTunes or on Stitcher. As Bryan said, likes, shares, and comments are very much appreciated. It helps to boost the show up and get the message out to more and more people. If you'd like to learn more about Overcoming Graduation, you can check us out on Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, and Instagram. And if you'd like to reach out to me directly, please send me an email at brian@overcominggraduation.com. So one more time, Bryan, thank you so much for your interview today, and thank you so much for your time.
Man, it's been a pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. I'll talk to you soon.
Bye, buddy.